Ontario Tech U students. Today I am joined by the wonderful Holly Baird. She is from Bethesda House. Holly is a child and youth worker within Bethesda House and also a DC graduate, so I should say alumni. So today we're going to touch on everything in terms of services offered, how Bethesda is such a huge part of our community, what that looks like, and then also experience as a graduate and someone who's gone from school into work and really just dived in and embraced and moved forward in her career. So Holly, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem.
I'm super grateful. It's honestly so important to me, and I know to the students, just to have local supports and hear these conversations and know what's available, because oftentimes we have all these amazing community supports and just our students don't know about them, and it's not for lack of promotion, it just seems to be the way of the world, right? So do you want to just share a little about yourself and just kick us off with who you are, your role, and all that good stuff?
For sure. So, as Louise said, my name's Holly Baird. I did graduate from Durham College. I started off with the Human Service Counselor program, which is now the Social Worker program. And then I bridged from that into the Child and Youth Work program. So once I completed both of those programs and got those diplomas, I decided to take it one step further and bridged over to Ryerson University, where I got my child and youth care degree. So that was a bit of a process because along the way I started to collect some jobs. So it ended up taking me quite a few years, but it also meant that I was getting a ton of work experience from a variety of places while I was furthering my education. So it kind of coincided and helped along with getting my degree.
Mm-hmm.
When I completed my child and youth work diploma at Durham College, my final placement was actually with Bethesda House. I knew nothing about it when I came here. I, just like you're saying, many of the students kind of had heard it existed, actually lived in the town where it is my entire life, but didn't know anything about it or even where it was or any of that. So I was a little nervous. I kind of had in my mind that shelters were only what you see on television. So very cold, kind of like a big open room with a bunch of bunk beds, very depressing, just not a nice feel to them. So I was pretty anxious when I first came. And here I am almost 12 years later and I haven't left. So
doing something right?
sure. I got to learn a lot through my placement. It was amazing because they kind of let me just have free range for the most part. The child and youth worker that was here at the time was going to be going on mat leave. So they kind of wanted to prep me for the job, for that opportunity or that possible opportunity. So I got to do things like run summer camps and plan all kinds of different day trips. I ran groups for the children and for the moms in shelter. And then I got to do some like one-on-one counseling and like support through the shelter as well as the outreach program. So it was kind of cool. They kind of just threw me in, supported me along the way, but gave me all the opportunities. Definitely encouraged me to step outside of my comfort zone and learn. And I ended up loving it and just continued to stay.
That's amazing. And I mean, it sounds like, for all there was that opportunity to sort of like pave your own way. You felt as though there was, that support there, that it had you had questions, did you need that? You weren't totally alone, like sort of the perfect learning environment, right?
For sure. Yeah, it was always very supported. And now being a staff here who does take on Durham College placement students, so always open. Unfortunately, COVID's put a bit of a damper on that for now, but we will again someday. So I always love taking students because I know how crucial of a role that was in my own experience. So I take in and try to give them the best opportunity possible too. And here we kind of believe we want to prep you for a job here. I mean, if we're already letting you have a placement here and training you for everything, and then you apply, you've already got most of the knowledge, right? And so it makes it even easier for when our managers are looking for people to bring you on as a staff. So that's kind of the way we look at it as you doing your placement here.
Yeah, I always look at it as like a win-win, right? It's like the students are winning in skills and exposure and experiences, and then employers are winning in that they're getting, fresh education and dedication, and right. So and it can be a beautiful thing when everything aligns, right?
For sure. And like you said, the fresh knowledge and fresh blood is always a great thing.
Yeah,
We're in a job where you get fatigued and you kind of get stuck in some ruts sometimes. So to have, somebody who's in school and just learned this brand new cool resource or this brand new fantastic way of doing things, and they can bring it in and we feel like, wow, hey, we didn't know that. I mean, like I said, it's been a while since I've been in school. So it does help to pull those things in and benefit from them as well.
yeah, 100%. And so, like we will put up all the contact information for reaching out for our students in order to do so at the end of the video. Um, are students still encouraged? I understand, with COVID placements probably aren't, running, or at least not in person. Is it still wise for a student to reach out during this time, or what do you think?
It never hurts. Once, like when we were taking students, we were getting tons and tons of resumes. So when we had ones that stand out, we will keep them kind of on file. So that even if I know most college programs have more than one placement, so even if maybe you couldn't get in for right now, maybe your next semester or so on. But yeah, it never hurts to reach out. I do think through our outreach program, they're working on doing some virtual placements, in seeing if some of the students can work on some of our programs that we have and kind of revamp them
Yeah.
through that. But that's something they're still kind of just dabbling into. We haven't quite got over the COVID hump of that yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's taken all of us by right, like there's still a world in motion with this stuff, and doing the best we can, and that looks different day to day.
Yeah.
Tell us about, so Bethesda, if you were to describe this to someone who's never heard of Bethesda House, has no idea what this is, what to expect, how would you describe, what to expect and what's on offer, and how that works?
So Bethesda House is a VAW shelter, which stands for Violence Against Women. So automatically, any violence against women shelter is a lot different than what you see on TV. It's a lot different than a homeless shelter. So we don't have the same mandates. So anyone who uses any of our services is either fleeing some sort of domestic violence or abuse, or they're looking to, or they have in the past. So we serve girls as young as 16 on their own. And then we can serve anyone above that age as well as seniors. We also serve children who come in with their moms. But like our mandate is with the women. So we work with them and support them in whatever way we can. So one of the ways we do that is through providing shelter through the shelter. So there is no sort of length of stay. It used to be an average of 3 months. Somebody could come into shelter, temporarily be housed here. We provide them with the basics, so food, toiletries, showers, laundry. We have living room. We now have Wi-Fi and Netflix and all that fun stuff thanks to COVID. Not always the best Wi-Fi, but we've got it, so that's a step up. And they're able to kind of come in here and use this as an opportunity to reground themselves. We have counselors here 24/7, so there's somebody constantly in the building. Yes. So myself, I'm here as the child and youth worker. So I work a lot with the women, but I also work with the children. So we do one-on-one counseling with the kids and the moms. I do groups with the kids and the moms when COVID allows it, although we're working on some virtual groups right now within the schools. But we kind of do what we can to provide a roundabout service for the women that are leaving. Things look a little different coming into shelter right now because of COVID. So women do go on a 2-week isolation period where them, and if they have children, they would stay in their rooms for those 2 weeks. They can go outside to the backyard as long as nobody else is around. And we give them meals. So it's kind of like a hotel with room service, but you don't have to pay.
Yeah.
So we do our best to cook meals and bring them up to them. They get snacks and things in their room. They can communicate with us over the phone, or we use something like Zoom or a different app. And it gives them the opportunity to kind of learn about their situation, what brought them in there. We teach them about the cycle of abuse. We teach them how to break that cycle, the impacts of it on not just them, but their children as well. Because sometimes we hear like moms say, oh, Bobby wasn't around when any of it happened, but Bobby actually heard it. He just thought he was sleeping in the room, and either way, you've still picked that child up and left their home and left everything they're used to, whether it's good or bad, that's still their norm. So kind of helping them create a new normal and get safe housing. So we do have a transitional housing support worker. So she helps with things like getting on the priority housing list, looking for like rent geared to income, or market rent places. She also supports them through the legal processes of some things. So yeah, so connecting them with resources, like we can give them a list of lawyers. We can't recommend specific lawyers, but we can give connections and things like Luke's Place, where they can get further support of things that maybe we can't provide. And then, like I said, we run here 24/7. So women can come in any time of the day. There's no specific time. They basically just call our crisis line, or they could email if it's maybe not safe to call. And we'd go through our intake process with them, which is a bit lengthy at this point in time because of COVID. So there's a few extra added aspects. And once we've said, okay, like they meet our mandate and we're able to bring them in, then we would arrange for them to come in, whether that's sending a taxi for them, or if they have a safe way to get here, then we would do that. And then they're here.
Capacity, like, is there, a point where it's like, oh my gosh, we are actually at our capacity, and then sort of is there a process for that?
So that has also changed because of COVID. So we're actually funded for 18 beds. In my time here, I think the most amount of people, including women and children, that we've had would be 25 or 26. It's a very busy, very full house when that happens. But now, because of COVID, and the women are still expected to follow social distancing policies and things like that while in the shelter, because as much as they're living in the same space, they're not from the same families and that kind of thing. So we basically have had to cut that in half, which has had a pretty big impact on a lot of things. It's hard for us because we're turning more and more people away. But we also have to keep everybody here safe, clients and staff included, right? So the best and easiest way we can do that is to continue to follow our social distancing and things like that. It's working out okay. We work with the other shelters in the area pretty closely. So when one of us is full, we will let others know, or if we have space, we let other shelters know that we have space, and they will contact us or refer people to us if they can't take them. One other cool thing about Bethesda House is we are the only shelter in Durham region that takes animals.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we take pretty good pride in that. It's been quite the process. It's only been a couple of years that it's been an actual legit thing. So basically, how that would work is, so some women won't leave because they don't want to leave their pet with their abuser, or they don't have somewhere safe for the dog or the cat or the whatever to go. So within reason, they can let us know that they have an animal, and we do a little animal intake, and make sure that the animal would be safe to have in shelter. So we can't take animals with really aggressive behavior, things like that. But we haven't had to turn away very many animals, I can say that, unless we didn't have space. And so we can bring them into shelter. They get a wellness check. So we're connected with the Bowmanville vet. And yeah, so they'll check over the animal and make sure there's no fleas or anything like that that could be contagious to anyone here or any other animals, and that the animal's in good health, and support the women through that. So that's really nice because that helps bring a lot of women who maybe wouldn't have come into shelter because of that. And it gives them the opportunities. We actually have a dog in shelter right now. There is rules around it. It's not like the animals are just running freely amongst the heads. They do stay in their room, and they can go out to the backyard and that kind of thing. But it is nice, and it's nice for staff too, because it adds another little extra treat for us every now and then.
Yeah, I would adore that
Yeah.
personally. As an animal lover, actually my cat is sitting right down here begging. She's not coming up.
No.
But so that puts me in mind of, when you're talking about barriers, I'm thinking also about people who might think like, I'm only dealing with this type of abuse, or I'm only dealing with that type of abuse. But so let's chat about, because you guys did a really good job on the website too, laying out, different just types of abuse that we don't necessarily give automatically a name to, but that are in fact abuse, and would be, more than good reason for someone coming forward. So do you want to walk us through some of those, just so for any students out there and women that are maybe kind of like on that cusp or not quite sure, maybe they'll identify with some of this stuff?
For sure. And you bring up a great point. Like, a lot of the times women will come in and we'll hear, oh, it wasn't that bad. He never hit me, or, she never did that though, or that kind of thing. And the reality is, you're right. There's a whole variety of abuse. And we do have our mandate from the shelter, or from the ministry, but we're pretty open shelter when it comes to that. So there's emotional abuse, there's psychological abuse, there's physical abuse, financial abuse, verbal abuse. Like, there's all different ways a person can abuse you. And sometimes things like emotional abuse, where they're just making you feel down all the time, and maybe they're isolating you, or they're controlling things and keeping you that way, or verbal abuse, where you're hearing every day just how awful you are, and that you could never do better, and no one else would ever want you, and things like that. Sometimes those things are almost more impactful and worse than the physical abuse. And we'll have women say that to us all the time. Like, there's women who have been beat up every day, and it was the day that he called her stupid that did it in. And it was just like, I could take the bruises that go away, but when he started getting at me in that way, I just couldn't do it anymore. And so, yeah, abuse is a big thing. We also deal with human trafficking victims.
Okay.
So we take in a fair amount of those. People don't realize how big of an issue human trafficking is in Durham region. It's a pretty serious thing, and it's happening everywhere. And it's not like in the movie Taken. It's not these crazy extravagant situations of people kidnapping people into their cars and things like that. It does look like that sometimes, but more often than not, it's more simple. Like, it's
What are students look for if even in self and in friends, what might be some warning signs for trafficking?
For sure. So a lot of the things, when we go into the high schools and we're talking with the kids in there, things will say, watch out for your friends who all of a sudden are carrying around, the Gucci purse. and the Prada shoes and things like that. And all of a sudden they have, this abundance of expensive items, or the people who are usually more withdrawn and maybe are becoming even more eccentric, and maybe they're wearing even more makeup, or suddenly they're getting more dolled up more often, or the opposite. People who are usually more out there and outgoing are kind of retracting, and maybe they're not being as social and they seem like they're isolating themselves more. People with new relationships. So it's very common in Durham region for what we call like the boyfriend experience.
Yeah.
So these guys will, and I'm using guys and women and men a lot because that tends to be more of what we deal with. But I'm not saying by any means that it's only something that happens to girls and it's only something that happens to men are only abusers. We take women who have been abused by their mothers, their sisters, their wives, their girlfriends, grandmothers as well.
That's such a good point. I love that you put that out there.
Yeah, like it can be anything. And when it comes to trafficking, sometimes it is women that bring other women into it, because women are more likely to trust another woman. Right? When a man comes up to us, we might kind of get that icky, okay, this is a little weird. He's, telling me I'm pretty, and that's strange. But if another woman comes up to you and she's like, oh, like, I love your dress, it looks beautiful, you might not feel that same kind of uncomfortable feeling. So, a lot of the times they kind of just rope you in, and they look for your vulnerabilities, and then they basically use those against you. And once you're kind of far enough into it, it's hard to get out of it. And sometimes it involves drugs, not always. Sometimes it's just that kind of mental hold that they can have on you. And it doesn't always take more. And we hear all the time, like, why doesn't she just leave? Or she could have just left the hotel room. Why wouldn't she have, left from those situations? But it really isn't that simple. And we have women who have, been here multiple times. It takes the average woman, I think the most recent stat was about 8 times to actually fully leave a relationship that's abusive, which is a lot.
But it's a recovery process, right? It's recovery of self. It's recovery of so much, and I think it's it's bravery and overcoming, and just the fact that women can return and not feel that shame and be welcomed back to their community, right?
Absolutely. And, we're all about that. We're in no judgment zone. We would rather you be open and honest and say, you know what, Holly, I'm going back home today. I just can't do it here. Like, I miss my family. I miss my life. I miss my house. I miss my gardens, whatever it is. And we'll be like, okay, so you know what? Let's come up with a safety plan. Let's, what happens if this happens again? What are you going to do? How are you going to get out? I'm sure lots of people have seen the phone calls of I'm going to order a pizza. Like those kind of things, we will make all those safety plans with people. And we take pride in the fact that they know they can come back here and not be judged and feel safe and protected. And that's a big thing for us, because we would rather have them come back here than feel like they can't have anywhere else to go and stay in those situations and possibly even worse happen.
Absolutely. And then you brought a point up, there was something that stuck in my mind there. So with trafficking can be, the introduction of substances, and we know substances over time can be abused. Sometimes addiction occurs. Are there any rules, regulations? Are there any supports or anything related to if substance use, to sort of to cope with the abuse that someone may have been suffering from, and that's sort of now that maybe secondary issue. Is that something that that someone would be able to talk about at the shelter or find support on?
Absolutely. So one of the things we found over the past couple of years before COVID was that a lot of our women were coming in with what we were calling concurrent disorders. So basically, they were coming in, they were already dealing with the abuse and, you know, the violence and whatever, and then they were dealing with mental health issues, or they were dealing with addiction issues, or both.
Yeah.
And it's very, very common. So yeah, like we work really closely with a lot of the local agencies, things like Pinewood, and we would connect with them the best we can. Women are not allowed to use drugs or alcohol on our property. That is one thing we have set up in place with them. And, you know, it's another thing that we safety plan around with them. And, you know, we're no judgment zone. So we're not going to, you know, judge you if you come home when you say you used, or, you know, if you're struggling that day, we're here to talk with you and help you, you know, go through those urges and work through it and come out on the other side, give you some techniques and some tips and things to deal with those feelings and deal with that, as well as get you connected with other counseling supports, because things like addictions don't just come up out of nowhere very often, right? There's usually a lot bigger underlying issues. So working through those underlying things and coming out is always important for us, and getting you connected to as many resources as possible.
Yeah. And then, so, and you mentioned there, like, if, you know, so say if a woman's been out, she comes back in, so tell me about sort of a typical day. Like, can someone who's, you know, taking refuge in the shelter leave for a few hours, come back in, like, sort of, or is there planning surrounding what that looks like?
So there's two answers to that. There's the COVID answer and the non-COVID answer.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, COVID has put a pretty big net over us. So women are not really able to come and go at this time due to the ministry's guidelines and things like that. They can come and go for essential things, so like school work, medical appointments, stuff like that. But just to kind of, you know, go see a friend or go out to the park and that kind of stuff, they can't. But pre-COVID, they were basically allowed to come and go as they please. There is a curfew of till 12:30. And as long as they were back before curfew, that was fine. They do sign in and out. So we have a time that we're expected to see them back. If they don't come back, we have safety measures in place to make sure that they're okay. And it's just, you know, the bus was late or whatever, not that they're in trouble of any kind. So we do, but they are basically normally able to come and go as they please. We don't have rules where like they have to be out for the entire day and things like that. That's usually more the homeless shelters. And we don't have, they are allowed to take one overnight a week pre-COVID. So they could go and stay somewhere that they felt was safe and for the night and then come back. So.
And then in terms of duration of stay, so I'm thinking, you know, if students are, you know, sort of thinking, wow, you know, especially right now with COVID, we've had a lot of students, you know, in situations, be it at home or wherever they're living, that, you know, haven't always necessarily been safe or the best place for them to be. So if they were approaching Bethesda and thinking this could be, you know, an opportunity for me to move forward in life, what could they expect in terms of duration of stay? Are there limits?
So before COVID, we would say the average stay was about 3 months. That doesn't mean that we kick people out at 3 months though. So as long as people are working towards things and working towards moving forward and housing and all of that, we will work with them. I think we've had people up to about just over a year, I think is the longest. But that's not a super common situation. Like in those kind of situations, there might be immigration issues and custody issues, like other things involved. So it's usually a few months, but in that time, you know, we help get those resources in place to try to help you move forward. Right now, there's very, very little housing available in Durham region. So just as much as the buying of houses has increased so much, rent has also increased. So that makes it very hard for people living on, you know, Ontario Works or ODSP, or if they have big families, things like that. It's not always easy to find a place to go. So we recognize that. I would say the average stay's probably increased from the 3 months, but some people get in here and I don't know how they do it, but they amazingly just find a place and they're good and they can get out and go in, a couple weeks or whatever. And that's fantastic. As long as it's somewhere safe. But sometimes it's just not a doable thing.
Yeah. And so then that brings me to, for anyone who might be wondering in terms of, are donations expected, or is there a fee? How does that work?
Nope. So all of our services are completely free. So the shelter, basically, we provide you with your basic necessities. So if you showed up with no clothing, then we do have a store where we get donations. So we would do our best to try to kind of pull some things from there, or connect with other services to get you some clothing items. We do have, we provide them with all of the food. So we will meet any special dietary requests that are needed, whether it's for religious reasons or medical or whatever. And the bedding, they basically have all of the basics that they need here. So it is a good opportunity for them to kind of save up money. We don't go and buy if they want fancy makeup or things like that, that's kind of their own expense, and they can do that. So right now it's basically like ordering off of Amazon or wherever, because they can't really go out to go shopping. But we also have an outreach program. So through our outreach program, we have a outreach counselor, Michelle. So she also provides free counseling for those in the community. Myself and her are actually going to be running a group for parents virtually. So this is going to be our first ever community group for people that aren't necessarily our clients. So it's up on our website or on our Facebook and our Instagram. I don't know if it's on the website right now. So that's going to be happening in April. Just, some tips and tricks to help get through COVID times and deal with domestic violence and all the issues that can come with it. So we do run those groups. Like I said before, Michelle and I do go out to the schools and we run groups in the schools or come out and do talks similar to this. And those services are all free of charge. So you can do those over the phone or over a Zoom, or once COVID's calmed down a bit, back to in person. So yeah, any of our services are completely free. We do get a small portion of our funding from the government, but a lot of our funds to run everything is what we fundraise. So fundraisers are very important for us. It's a very crucial piece.
Well, and so let's chat about that, because again, from that student perspective, where they might be looking for, so many of our students look for the volunteer opportunities. And again, I know right now maybe it's sort of a tricky time, but then, what types of things maybe, in the future, if not now, could they maybe dive into and help with?
Yep. So our store downtown Bowmanville is called Second Chance. So it's a completely secondhand store. So everything that goes there has been 100% donated. But the best part about the store is it's completely volunteer run. So it actually, yeah, so other than for the building itself, it doesn't cost us anything, which means that we are able to make a fairly significant profit from it, which basically funds our entire outreach program. So yeah, so it's pretty cool. So that's an opportunity. It's actually just opening up again, or just opened up again. So that is an opportunity for volunteers right now.
Oh, cool.
Even to help. We also take volunteers for all different kinds of things. So on our website, Gila Pitter is the outreach manager, and she's a volunteer coordinator as well. So she would be the one that they could contact, and basically she will set them up with whatever best meets what they're looking for and that we can benefit from.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I had no idea, and I live north of Bowmanville. I've been in the store, right? I did not know that. So This is why I love these, because I always learn so much too. And so it's a win-win always. Um, I'm just being mindful of time. So are there any other things you would want to share that, things I didn't ask, or like anything pressing that didn't come up?
I don't think so. I mean, it's an extremely rewarding job. Everybody kind of, I always get the, oh, that would probably be really sad and depressing. Like you're listening to all these awful stories all the time. And I'm like, yeah, like you hear a lot of sad things, but I also get to share in those joyous moments, and I get to see, people break that cycle and move on. And I get, the emails 2 years later of the pictures of the kids grown up and, them doing well. So, I mean, you make of it what you can. No day is the same.
Yeah.
Almost 12 years in, and I learn something every single day. um, and it's never really dull. And those moments when it is quiet, you just enjoy those quiet moments and wait for it to go crazy again. And it's definitely an incredible experience, and I'm very, very grateful that I actually got placed here, and brought that opportunity, because it's clearly had a major impact on my life. So
Oh, and I'm sure vice versa, but I can tell that you love it. I can see it. And it does sound incredible. Like it does sound like an incredible place, not only to work, but just for our community, right? To support, it's a safe haven, right?
absolutely. And
What
we
would
take a lot of
you,
pride in it. That's okay. Sorry. We take a lot of pride. My team's amazing. We're very close. We're very supportive of each other. Some of the most amazing women I've ever got to know, I've met here. And we take a lot of pride in, you often hear that Bethesda House is one of the more homey shelters, in that it's more comforting and, less clinical feeling, and those kind of things. And that's exactly what we want. That's what we want to hear, is we want people to feel safe and comfortable, and this is a spot they can truly relax and get back on their feet.
yeah. And then, yeah, I can understand that. Um, and then from a, you know, post grad perspective, and looking back, to your education, because I did say I would touch on that. I know our students always love tidbits from grads. Um, I guess just any tips now being in the field for, say, our child and youth worker students, or anything you could think of, or something you wish you'd known when you were a student, or when you were looking for placements, like anything that you feel like sharing that might be that nugget for someone.
Honestly, take the risk. Step out of your comfort zone. If you lived a sheltered life like I did, you have no idea what's out there. And as scary as it may seem, you could be the person who's going to change that and help make that impact. So, when you get that placement that you're not so sure about, and maybe you don't want to go, just make the best of it that you can, because either way, even if it's not a great placement, you will learn something from it, whether it's what not to do or exactly what you want to do. And keep an open mind, not just with this placements in the school, but with the clients, and let them teach you. I've learned more from the clients here probably sometimes than I ever could teach them. And they have opened my mind to things I could have never imagined I would have different opinions of that I do now. So, just go into it with an open mind and be willing to push your own boundaries.
I love that. I think you just like that should be on a t-shirt somewhere, all of them. Just or a wall mural. Like that was good. Holly, thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to have details on where to reach Bethesda House, the different platforms that you guys utilize, and how to connect that way. So we encourage students, like, reach out, even if it's just with questions. I always say there's no such thing as a stupid question, right?
Absolutely.
So reach out, and for students thinking about placements, never too soon to start getting your name out there, right? So reach out, and again, Holly, thank you so much.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.
No,
Bye.
bye.